Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Maller-Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnerships with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. Smithville Fiber Internet Security Solutions and Voice in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Bunger and Robertson Attorneys at Law, utilizing 75 years of experience, knowledge, and resources to help individuals and families recover in personal injury matters. Information at lawbr.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. Some state officials want to defund Indiana University because of its continued association with the Kinsey Institute.
It goes to wages, salaries, benefits. It goes to everything.
The university maintains it's following the law and that the institute no longer uses any state funding. Grain entrapments are the leading cause of agricultural confined space injuries and deaths, killing around 24 people every year.
He had gone to the top to look in, and that was basically the last time that he was seen.
Officials say education and safety procedures are the best way to prevent accidents. And the U.S. Surgeon General wants warning labels on alcohol containers to include risks for cancer. These stories and more right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. The Kinsey Institute has been controversial and groundbreaking since its founding in 1947. But some Indiana state leaders are preparing a new attack on the Institute and Indiana University. Higher education reporter Aubrey Wright has more.
While Bloomington is continuing to rally around the Kinsey Institute, pushback comes from Indianapolis. Some state officials are calling on the Indiana General Assembly to defund Indiana University. It's because of IU Bloomington's remaining ties to the Kinsey Institute. The institute was founded by Alfred Kinsey almost 80 years ago, focusing on human sexuality. Kinsey staff also research issues in gender, reproduction, and sexual health. In 2023, Representative Larissa Sweet of Wabash led the charge to cut all state funding from the Kinsey Institute, spreading unfounded claims about child abuse.
I, for one, do not want 1 cent of Hoosier tax dollars to help shield child sex predators. By limiting the funding to Kinsey Institute,
the General Assembly decided to cut all public funding for the Kinsey Institute. Now, some Indiana leaders aren't satisfied. They're calling on the legislature to take away all public funding from the university. State Comptroller Elise Nishala says if IU wants to keep its funding, it should completely separate from the Kinsey Institute.
It goes to, you said the website, it goes to wages, salaries, benefits. It goes to everything. Janitorial services or utilities.
IU has maintained that the Kinsey Institute doesn't use any state funding and that the university has always complied with the law. Kinsey supporters donated almost $4 million in 2023 and hosted protests in support. With speeches, petitions, and demonstrations around campus, protesters wanted to keep the institute intact. Professor Emeritus Russ Skibba was one of them. He says the legislature's push against people with different heritage, backgrounds, and ideas evoke Indiana's racist history.
We're widely known as the state that was pretty much the capital of the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s, and rightly so.
Faculty, staff, and students at Indiana colleges have raised alarms about threats to academic freedom. Skibba says attacks against Kinsey are vindictive and that other new bills are matching a disturbing trend. But IU and the Kinsey Institute still have some support in the legislature.
They're claiming that IU is not following the law, which they are. It's just a lot of complex accounting. They don't seem to understand that, one, Kinsey never had a direct appropriation from the legislature, so there's no money directly flowing to the Kinsey Institute.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Aubrey Wright.
Nishala and Sweet will meet with other Kinsey critics in Indianapolis next week. They say they'll share more on their plans to defund IU then. The 2025 session of the Indiana General Assembly got underway Wednesday, and while more than 1,000 pieces of legislation will be filed, the most significant will be House Bill 1001. The new two-year state budget. After putting that budget together will be more challenging this year than it's been for a while, as state revenues are projected to be much tighter, not to mention the growth of Medicaid spending, which is driving budget plans this year. We're joined now by Indiana Public Broadcasting State House reporter Brandon Smith for more on this year's session. Welcome to the show, Brandon. So overhauling Medicaid is a top priority for Republicans this year. What does the GOP hope to accomplish?
Well, there's been significant growth in Medicaid spending in the state budget in the last few years, and lawmakers are trying to slow that growth down. And what Senate Republicans are proposing is a major change to the Medicaid expansion program known as the Healthy Indiana Plan. Now, their legislation would cap the number of people who are allowed to be on the program at 500,000, which would mean nearly 200,000 people on the program now would be kicked off, lose their insurance, and be put on a waiting list.
And Brandon, they're also looking at tackling property tax reform.
Yeah, this is a priority for both political parties and Governor-elect Braun this session. Though Senate Republicans are cautioning about how drastic changes to property taxes would affect local governments.
We are committed to providing property tax relief to Hoosiers, but we've also got to balance the funding needs for schools and local units of governments like counties, cities, towns, and townships.
The Senate GOP says it's going to treat this bill on the property tax reform like they do the budget. So it will begin as the governor's proposal, in this case Braun's plan, which would revert property tax bills to what they were in 2021 and cap future increases. Then Senate Republicans will remake the bill into their preferred version. Then the House will do the same. And eventually a final version will be worked out between the two chambers and the governor's office.
So now, Brandon, with the GOP holding super majorities in both chambers, what can Democrats hope to accomplish this year?
Well, Democrats will offer their own ideas on major issues, but there is a lot of bipartisan agreement, generally speaking, on the biggest topics lawmakers need to tackle this year, including health care costs.
It's time to take on insurance companies for their role in rising costs and cut the paperwork red tape.
So Mike Braun will be in the governor's office after 8 years of Eric Holcomb. Do you expect to see any changes in the relationship between governor and the legislature?
Well, Mike Braun has spent the last decade serving in legislative bodies, including the Indiana House, where there are still lawmakers there who served with him. And Braun has talked a lot about being very collaborative with the General Assembly.
Okay, Brandon, thank you so much. Appreciate you being on the show, and also looking forward to your reporting this session.
Thanks, Joe.
Indiana is among the worst states for access to child care, and some lawmakers want to allocate more funding in the state budget to better support the industry and the Hoosiers who rely on it. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Tamoria Cunningham reports House Democrats say it's a key priority in the upcoming legislative session.
Representative Carrie Hamilton, an Indianapolis Democrat, says child care deserts across the state pose a challenge for working parents. There are currently 780 licensed child care centers in the state and more than 2,000 licensed home care providers. But Hamilton says it's not enough to meet the need for Hoosiers across the state, something she wants to change this session.
What we would like to do is maximize that federal support and look at a range of policies that would help expand access to child care across Indiana.
Hamilton says this includes creating access to affordable child care in every county and increasing wages for child care workers.
We want to make sure that kids have access not just to a safe place, but to a safe learning place.
For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Tamoria Cunningham.
And now for more headlines from across the state. Research shows drinking alcohol, even in moderation, leads to a higher risk of some types of cancer. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy is advising Congress to update the warning label on cans and bottles of alcohol. Ethan Sandwise reports.
The Surgeon General cited research that drinking leads to around 100,000 cases of cancer and 20,000 cancer deaths each year in the United States alone. While many Americans know the risks drinking poses to your liver and during pregnancies, most are unaware of the links between alcohol and cancer. Murthy wants the new label to change that.
We have known about the cancer risk of alcohol for at least a couple of decades. That data has continued to emerge and confirm that alcohol is known to cause at least 7 different types of cancer.
The U.S. hasn't changed the warning label since it was introduced in 1988, but South Korea and Ireland have already passed laws requiring information about cancer risks on their drinks in response to a growing body of evidence.
It can actually directly damage the DNA, which can cause cancer. It can cause inflammation in the body, which can cause cancer, and it can change the body's hormones, essentially increasing estrogen, which influences the risk on breast cancer risk.
Changing the label requires an act of Congress. That's a tough sell in America, where the alcoholic beverage market is worth around $260 billion. Surveys by the state show almost half of Hoosiers drink alcohol at least once a month.
Currently, the recommendation is to drink no more than 1 drink per day if you're a woman, no more than 2 drinks per day if you're a man. Emerging data is telling us that even if you're drinking those recommendations or even less than that, that your risk of cancer is still there.
Dr. Vodder says evidence shows graphic images of negative health effects are a stronger deterrent than text alone, an approach which countries in Europe have already taken to cigarette sales. What Murthy recommends is a milder, simple update to the existing text. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Ethan Sandweiss.
The Surgeon General's recommendations are non-binding, and Murthy is set to be replaced by Trump pick Marty McCary in January. Republican State Representative Alan Morrison has been tapped to head up Indiana's Department of Natural Resources. He says he intends to help carry out Governor-elect Mike Braun's agenda to make it easier for businesses to move in and grow. During his 10 years representing House District 42, Morrison sponsored bills to significantly reduce protections for the state's wetlands. Entrance fees for certain state parks and recreation areas could increase under a bill authored by Republican Dave Hall, who represents all of Brown County and part of Monroe. House Bill 1245 would allow counties to introduce an extra fee of no more than $1 to enter state parks and recreation areas. The money would be collected by the Department of Natural Resources and then paid to the county treasurer to use for either public safety or water quality improvements.
I think any kind of additional resources we can get into the programs that are involved in ensuring that Lake Monroe remains a clean and healthy water source for the city is a good thing.
Annual state park pass holders would not have to pay that extra fee. If passed, the bill would become law July 1st. President-elect Donald Trump has promised to rescind any unspent dollars from the Inflation Reduction Act. That's the Biden administration's major climate bill that funds everything from energy efficiency upgrades to homes to green manufacturing. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Rebecca Thiel reports that have benefited from the law, like Indiana, may want to keep that funding.
The IRA has resulted in more than $7 billion in private investment and 5,000 proposed jobs for the Hoosier State, mostly in electric vehicle battery manufacturing. Indiana University professor David Koniski researches environmental and energy policy. He says though Trump can revoke those unspent funds, only Congress can repeal the law.
I suspect that Republicans will try to peel back some portions of the Inflation Reduction Act, but will try to keep others in place because their constituents, businesses in their districts or in their states are benefiting.
During his first 4 years, Trump rolled back more than 100 environmental rules, undermined environmental science at federal agencies, and withdrew the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement. Koniski says Trump will likely return to that playbook, but with more experience and a more favorable Supreme Court.
I suspect the Trump administration has learned from those experiences and will be more diligent in making sure that these new efforts are more likely to survive legal challenge.
For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Rebecca Thiel.
IU Bloomington Hospital, as well as hospitals in Bedford and Paoli, began limiting visitors Monday amid a rise in flu, COVID-19, and other respiratory illnesses. At IU Bloomington, visitors may not come if they have respiratory symptoms and must be over age 18. Some units may have more stringent regulations, such as the intensive care and neonatal units. IU health officials anticipate it will be several weeks before visitor regulations go back to normal. Coming up next on Indiana News Desk.
I started doing a lot of research on grain bin safety, and it became my mission to save a life.
A mother who lost her son 5 years ago in a grain bin incident is hoping to save lives. I spoke with her as well as experts to learn more about grain bin entrapments.
This story and more right here on Indiana News Desk.
You have unleashed the best storytelling ever.
Migration is freedom to Black America.
There's much about me that you don't know.
Let's go, baby.
The age of dinosaurs still continues.
You didn't know that, did you?
I think we may have solved our mystery.
All of these movements are expressions of hope.
It's better than any movie script I've ever read.
It's an incredible story.
Welcome back to Indiana News Desk. Monroe County School Corporation has removed the interim tag from Superintendent Mark A. Winston. The board officially named the longtime public school servant superintendent during a meeting Tuesday night. Winston had been the interim superintendent since Jeff Oswald was fired last March. I spoke with Winston following the meeting. Here's what she had to say.
Honestly, it's just a continuation, building upon the history and the traditions of our school corporation. We've got a lot of wonderful things in place, and I think from yesterday to today and on to tomorrow, I'm just going to continue to do that work, really focusing on the future and making sure that the opportunity that I have in front of me is to position this corporation for the future, and that's my biggest priority. Number one is health and safety, making sure that we're keeping our students healthy and that we're keeping them safe, and our faculty as well and all of our staff members. That's certainly number one. Continuing our traditions of accelerating learning for everybody's children, that's certainly a big priority. Another strategic priority has to do with our facilities. We want to continue to make sure that we have state-of-the-art facilities for athletics, for academics, for our performing arts. We want to make sure that we're fiscally healthy and sound as an organization. That's certainly a major priority. And I'm certain that there are other areas that we want to continue to focus on. Of course, as you know, early learning, continuing to expand and grow our early learning program, that's definitely one of our major priorities. And so the board has the priority also of balancing SES. So I think amongst all of those things that I've mentioned, balancing SES is their number one priority, and I'm tasked and charged, and my leadership team and I, of addressing that. And so there's no shortage of priorities and work to be done in the next 12 months and beyond. SES is important because we want to make sure that our students are having experiences alongside students who look like them, students who don't look like them, from different backgrounds, different walks of life, because that's what society is. Society is very diverse, and we want to make sure that our students have those kinds of experiences. And we recognize that every child is going to benefit from those kinds of learning experiences and those kinds of relationships. There are a lot of legislative challenges, I guess is the best word I could say. The vouchers, charter schools, all of those things are significant impacts on our school district, as it is for every other public school district in the state, and quite frankly, it's across the country. So there are challenges. So we're certainly monitoring the legislative session that will begin tomorrow, actually, to see what comes out of that and how that's going to impact us in terms of our students, in terms of our instruction, and most certainly our finances. It's pretty awesome. It's pretty amazing. And just to be trusted with the future of over 10,000 children. I take that very sincerely. I am honored to be in this position, and I am very eager alongside my team to make sure that we position our students to be excellent in all that they do, whatever their endeavors are. And it's a pretty amazing feeling to be in this role at this particular time, to lead this corporation, and I am going to fulfill every promise that I make.
More than 24 people die annually in grain bin accidents across the nation. Our Clayton Baumgarth has the story about grain bin deaths in Indiana.
Thanks, Joe. A report released by Purdue Extension late last year said grain entrapments are the leading cause of agricultural confined space injuries and fatalities. I spoke with a mother whose son passed a few years ago from a grain entrapment incident, as well as experts to learn more. On a bitter cold morning in Waveland, Indiana, a mother does something no parent should have to do. She visits her son's final resting place.
He loved to be outside. He loved to hunt. He loved to fish. He loved to be with his friends. He loved to joke around. He was just just an all-around good country boy.
In 2019, her 18-year-old son Colton was employed by a local farm. He tended to fields, operated equipment, and worked around grain bins at harvest time. On November 22nd of that year, Anita received terrible news.
I received a call from a Colton's employer that he was missing and that they thought that he may be inside the bin.
She raced to the site where emergency vehicles were already on the scene. It was there that Anita's world came crashing down.
He had gone to the top to look in, and that was basically the last time that he was seen. So I can only imagine that there was, that it was clogged. They were trying to take grain out, and that he went inside. I'll never know.
Colton's story is one of 39 grain bin deaths that occurred nationally in 2019. Since then, the number of what the industry calls confined space emergencies has increased, but the number of deaths have slightly decreased. In 2022, there were 55 cases of confined space emergencies nationally, with 29 fatalities. Since Colton's passing, his mother has worked to bring that number down.
Shortly after Colton passed, I started doing a lot of research on grain bin safety, grain bin accidents. I didn't know anything about it, so I learned a lot about it, and it became my mission to save a life.
She also set up the Colton Howard Memorial Fund to donate specialized rescue equipment to fire departments around the state.
Currently, we're up to about $40,000 worth of equipment, and it's mainly going out to rural fire departments where, the funding is just not there.
Between 2022 and 2024, the fund has donated equipment to 23 departments, including Vigo, Johnson, and Bartholomew counties. People enter grain bins when grain becomes clumped and needs to be broken up so the loosened grain can unload.
A lot of the time we can trace that all the way back to the fact that there's probably grain that's out of condition, perhaps moldy, had gotten wet, whatever, was stored wet, and it gets clumped up or clogged up.
When a person breaks up clumps, the disruption can trigger suction-like action and a loss of footing. Entrapment happens quickly.
Within a few seconds, you can be buried up to your knees, and essentially once you're to your knees, there's no getting out. And as long as that flow continues, there's no stopping it.
For years, Purdue Extension and OSHA have urged education on safety procedures as the best way to prevent the tragedies. Purdue is also focused on preventing the original cause of clumping, excess moisture in the bins. In years with more rain than usual or more humidity in the air, it is more likely clumps of wet grain will form in the bin.
That grain is never going to get better than the day you put it in there. So the better condition you can have it in the bin and maintain it that way, the less chance you're going to have to go in there and grub around.
Another prevention measure is a lifeline attached to the person entering the grain bin. The emergencies are difficult to document. OSHA does have rules in place for properly working on or around grain bins, but farms with 10 employees or fewer, such as the one Colton worked at, are not subject to OSHA regulations.
It makes it a challenge for us while we research these types of incidents because there's no reporting requirements. Most of our data about these incidents that occur on private farms comes from newspaper articles.
Colton's mother, Anita, hopes to continue raising money to help prevent what no other mother should endure.
Make sure you have a lifeline. Make sure you have somebody with you. Make sure the auger's not on. Make sure it's locked out, tagged out. I mean, those are the simple things that I have learned, in just my small amount of research. Colton should be here today. He would be here today had he, stopped and thought before he acted.
And Joe, that very same week that I spoke with Anita for this story, a man in Lake County, Indiana became trapped in a grain silo and died despite a 4-hour rescue effort. For Indiana News Desk, I'm Clayton Baumgarth.
All right, thanks, Clayton. Well, Indiana's getting another round of snow today, but it's a far cry from the snowfall that shut down much of the state Sunday and Monday. We're expecting to get 3 to 4 inches across southern Indiana today, so be careful out there. That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana News Desk is made possible in part by Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnerships with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. Smithville Fiber Internet Security Solutions and Voice in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Bunger and Robertson Attorneys at Law, utilizing 75 years of experience, knowledge, and resources to help individuals and families recover in personal injury matters. Information at lawbr.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.